On my 32nd birthday, my family presented me with what they called a special gift. When I opened it, I found an eviction notice for my grandmother's historic house, the very home I'd spent years restoring. I met their expectant gazes with a practiced smile, my fingers trembling slightly against the crisp paper. I'm Alexandra Mitchell, and this is how my family's betrayal unfolded on what should have been a day of celebration. Go ahead, darling. We're all waiting to see your reaction. My mother, Eleanor, urged from her perch on our antique sofa. Her voice carried that familiar nervous tremor, the one I'd learned to recognize during my years as a hospice nurse. The elegant envelope sat innocently in my lap, wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate bow. Our family living room, with its carefully restored Victorian details that I'd spent countless weekends perfecting, was filled with familiar faces. My cousin Gabrielle perched on the armrest like a hawk watching its prey, her designer suit seeming overdressed for a family gathering. My brother Ethan lingered by the original marble fireplace, hands buried deep in his pockets, conspicuously avoiding my gaze. "We don't have all day, Alex." Gabrielle's voice dripped with artificial sweetness. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently against her knee. Something about her formal attire and perfectly composed expression set off warning bells in my mind. The same instincts I'd developed assessing patients' families during my nursing career. The cake's sweetness still lingered on my tongue as I carefully opened the envelope. The moment I saw the bold, legal typescript, my stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "Notice of eviction" stared back at me, the words burning into my retinas. "What is this?" My voice emerged barely above a whisper, years of professional composure preventing it from shaking. "Mom? Dad?" My mother's carefully maintained facade crumpled slightly. "Sweetheart, we've been trying to find the right moment to discuss this." "Discuss what exactly?" I stood, the paper trembling in my hands. "That you're evicting me from my home? The house I've poured not just my savings, but my heart into. The home Grandma wanted me to have." Gabrielle cleared her throat, straightening her Chanel blazer. "Alexandra, let's be reasonable here. The house was never officially yours. The deed remains in your parents' names, and they've made a business decision." "A business decision?" I spun to face her, my analyst's mind already calculating the angles. "What exactly do you know about this, Gabrielle?" "I'm simply helping the family make the most financially sound choice," she replied, smoothing her skirt. "The real estate market is extraordinarily favorable right now." "The market?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "This isn't one of your investment properties, Gabrielle. This is my home. My grandmother's legacy." Ethan finally spoke up, his architect's eye avoiding the very details he'd helped me restore. "Alex, maybe we should discuss this privately." The confrontation. "No." I slammed the eviction notice onto our restored mahogany coffee table, making the vintage cake plates rattle. "I want answers right now." "Mom? Dad? Why are you doing this?" My father, Richard, a man who taught me the value of direct eye contact, suddenly found our restored hardwood floors fascinating. "There have been concerns about your ability to maintain the property appropriately. Gabrielle has shown us some concerning documentation." "Documentation?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. My real estate analyst's mind kicked into high gear, already detecting inconsistencies. "What documentation?" "Look around you. I've personally overseen every restoration, the period-appropriate hardwood floors, the updated kitchen that still preserves the Victorian aesthetic, every single historical detail preserved and enhanced. I did all of this while working full-time as a nurse before transitioning to real estate analysis. With questionable contractors," Gabrielle interjected with practiced concern. "There are noise complaints from neighbors. unauthorized modifications to a historical property. That's absolutely false. Years of examining property documents had taught me to spot fabrications. Dakota, you've been here through every step of the renovation. Tell them. Dakota, my best friend since nursing school, stepped forward from her corner, her legal assistant training evident in her precise tone. Every single renovation Alexandra has done has been meticulously documented. I've personally reviewed all the permits and historical preservation approvals. My mother reached for my hand with the same gentleness she'd once used to comfort families at my nursing home. Sweetheart, you have 30 days to. I jerked away from her touch, my professional composure finally cracking. 30 days to leave my home? You're telling me this on my birthday? The room started to spin, but my analyst's mind kept working, connecting dots. How long have you been planning this? Gabrielle stood, adjusting her blazer with the same precision she probably used in her banking deals. I think we should all approach this rationally. The decision has been made, Alexandra. Fighting it will only complicate matters unnecessarily. Looking at her perfectly composed expression, something clicked in my mind. This wasn't just about the house. This was calculated, planned, just like the development proposals I reviewed daily at work. Her formal outfit, the mysterious documentation, her strategic positioning as the voice of reason. Get out, I whispered, then louder. Everyone, get out. Alexandra, my mother started, but they filed out one by one, leaving only Dakota behind. As the door closed behind my family, I collapsed onto the antique sofa my grandmother had reupholstered herself, the eviction notice mocking me from the coffee table. Dakota sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Her presence steady and grounding, just like during our long hospital shifts together. This isn't over, Alex. Something's not adding up here, and we're going to figure it out. I wiped my eyes, analytical determination replacing shock. You're right. Gabrielle's orchestrating this somehow. She's always envied this house, ever since we were kids. I straightened up, my mind already formulating strategies like I would for any complex property analysis. And I'm going to prove it. Looking around at my beloved home, at the walls I'd carefully painted in historically accurate colors, the fixtures I'd painstakingly restored, the memories I'd preserved and created, I made a promise to myself. This wouldn't be the last birthday I'd celebrate here. Not if I had anything to say about it. The morning after. The morning after my disastrous birthday, I sat at my antique kitchen counter, staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Mom, 5 from Ethan, none from Gabrielle. Of course. The morning light filtered through the original stained glass windows I'd spent months restoring, casting kaleidoscope patterns across my untouched coffee. You need to eat something, Dakota said, sliding a plate of toast in front of me. She'd stayed the night, sleeping on my carefully restored Victorian fainting couch, just like we used to crash in each other's dorm rooms during nursing school. You can't fight this on an empty stomach. I pushed the plate away, my mind already running through property regulations and zoning laws. I can't eat. I need to understand exactly what Gabrielle's been telling my parents. My hands shook slightly as I pulled up my mother's contact information. I'm calling her. Put it on speaker, Dakota said, settling beside me with the same steady presence she'd maintained through countless difficult nights at the hospice. Mom answered on the first ring. Alexandra, thank goodness. We've been so worried. Save it. I cut her off, my analyst's instincts taking over. I want to know exactly what Gabrielle has been saying about me. A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. Honey, it's not just what Gabrielle said. She showed us documentation of unauthorized construction, complaints from the Historical Preservation Society. That's impossible. My fist hit the counter, making my coffee cup rattle. I have every permit, every approval, every historical preservation certification right here in my files. Who specifically complained? Well, I don't have the actual complaints in front of me. Gabrielle handled all of that. Of course she did. I laughed bitterly, my real estate experience screaming red flags. And did you bother to verify any of it? To ask me about it before ambushing me on my birthday? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. Mom? Gabrielle said you'd deny everything, she finally replied, her voice small. She said you've been struggling financially, that you've been cutting corners on the restoration. I want copies of everything, I demanded, slipping into my professional tone. Every document, every complaint, everything Gabrielle showed you. Today. Alexandra, please understand. No. You understand that this house is my legacy. I've put every penny I have into preserving it properly, and I'm not leaving without a fight. I hung up before she could respond. Dakota squeezed my shoulder, her touch grounding me like it had during our toughest shifts. That's my girl. Now what? Now we gather evidence. I grabbed my laptop, falling back on my years of property analysis experience. I need proof that Gabrielle's lying. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Meet me at Morrison's Coffee in 30. Need to talk. It's important. At Morrison's Coffee. 20 minutes later, I walked into Morrison's, the rich coffee aroma doing nothing to settle my churning stomach. I spotted Ethan in our usual corner booth, his architect's portfolio tucked beside him, his face drawn with guilt. You knew, I accused, sliding into the seat across from him. My professional veneer cracked slightly. You knew what they were planning? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen countless times when he was reviewing troublesome blueprints. I found out yesterday morning. Mom and Dad swore me to secrecy, said Gabrielle had proof you were in financial trouble. And you believed her? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Of course not. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, something weird is going on. Last week, I overheard Gabrielle on the phone talking about property values and development opportunities in the neighborhood. My heart stopped, my analyst's mind instantly connecting the dots. Development opportunities? Yeah. And here's the kicker. Her fiance, Marcus. His family owns that new luxury condo complex downtown. The Valum Group. The pieces started falling into place like a perfectly orchestrated property deal. Our street was one of the last historically preserved areas in town, prime for development. My grandmother's house sat on the largest lot. She wants to sell it to developers, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. That's why she's doing this. There's more, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. I did some digging. Gabrielle's been meeting with the City Planning Commission, and guess who else attended those meetings? Mom and Dad. He met my eyes. They think they're protecting you from financial ruin, but Gabrielle's manipulating them. She's convinced them selling is the only way to save you from yourself. My phone buzzed. An email from Mom with attachments. I opened them, my years of analyzing property documents kicking in. These documents. The letterhead is wrong. The permit numbers don't match my records. She forged them. I showed them to Ethan, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and vindication. Keep your voice down, Ethan warned, glancing around the cafe. Gabrielle has connections everywhere. I don't care. This is proof she's lying. I stood up, energized by the discovery. I need to show Mom and Dad. Wait, Ethan grabbed my wrist. Gabrielle's wedding to Marcus is in 2 weeks. Everyone will be there. Family, friends, business associates, the entire Valum Group board. If you're going to expose her, that's your chance to do it properly. I sank back into my seat, my mind racing with possibilities. 2 weeks to gather evidence to prove she's trying to steal my home for her fiance's development company. I'll help, Ethan said firmly. So will Dakota. But we have to be smart about this. I nodded, my analytical determination replacing despair. Gabrielle thinks she's dealing with the same sentimental nurse who used to take her shifts at the hospice. She has no idea what I've learned since becoming a property analyst. Walking back home, I called Dakota. Hey, remember that contact of yours at the city planning office? We need to talk to them. Now. The game was on, and this time, I was playing with professional expertise. At the planning office. The city planning office filled my senses with its familiar scent of old paper and printer toner. Dakota's friend, Amanda, pulled another file from the cabinet, adding it to the growing stack on her desk. Her movements were precise, professional, someone who understood the value of proper documentation. These are all the development proposals for your neighborhood from the past 6 months, she said, keeping her voice low despite the empty office. Including 3 from the Valum Development Group, Marcus's company. I muttered, my trained eyes scanning the documents. My hands froze on a familiar architectural sketch. This is my house. Dakota leaned over my shoulder, her legal assistant's eye catching the same details I did. Look at the date. This was filed 2 months ago. Before the eviction notice, I said, my analyst's mind racing. Before any of this started. Amanda glanced nervously at the door, her experience with sensitive documents evident. There's something else. These signatures here, she pointed to the bottom of the document. Your parents' names, authorizing the preliminary survey. My stomach lurched. They've been planning this for months. Alex. Dakota grabbed my arm, pointing to another name. Look who notarized it. The name jumped off the page. Theodore Quinn, Gabrielle's father. That manipulative little. I stopped as footsteps echoed in the hallway. Amanda quickly gathered the files, returning them to their cabinet with practiced efficiency. I've got copies at my desk, she whispered. I'll email them to you tonight. We barely made it out before someone entered the office. In the parking lot, I leaned against my car, trying to steady my breathing. The morning sun felt too bright, too harsh. We need to talk to Marcus, Dakota said, her legal training evident in her strategic thinking. Maybe he doesn't know the full extent of what Gabrielle is doing. He has to know. His company filed the proposals. My phone rang. Ethan. Sis, you need to get to Mom and Dad's now. What's wrong? Gabrielle is here with some contractor, talking about renovation plans. They're acting like they already own the place. I was already in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I'm coming. Confrontation at parents' house. 15 minutes later, I stormed through my parents' front door, my real estate analyst's badge still hanging around my neck from work. Gabrielle's voice drifted from the kitchen, smooth as expensive silk. The whole neighborhood will benefit from the modernization. Property values will soar. Over my dead body, I announced, making them all jump. My professional demeanor slipped entirely. Gabrielle recovered first, her investment banker's smile never wavering. Alexandra, we were just discussing the neighborhood's future potential. You mean your future, your fiance's future. I slapped the development proposals on the kitchen table, my years of document analysis giving weight to my actions. When were you going to tell everyone about Marcus's plans? My mother's perfectly maintained facade paled. What is she talking about, Gabrielle? Don't listen to her, Gabrielle said smoothly. Alexandra is just upset about the necessary transition of property ownership. Show them, I demanded, my voice carrying the authority I developed in countless property negotiations. Show them the real reason you want my house. The contractor cleared his throat awkwardly. I should go. Stay, Gabrielle commanded, her banking authority evident. Alexandra's just being emotional, as usual. Always so sentimental about property values. Emotional? I laughed, the sound sharp with professional indignation. You forged documents. You lied to my parents. You're trying to steal my home for your fiance's development projects. That's enough. My father shouted, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Enough? I grabbed the proposals, throwing them in front of him. Look at the dates. Look at the signatures. She's been planning this for months. I've analyzed enough property deals to recognize a hostile takeover when I see one. My mother picked up the papers, her hands trembling. These aren't the documents you showed us, Gabrielle. Because they're fake, Gabrielle snapped, her composed demeanor cracking. Alexandra's desperate. She'll say anything. I have copies from the city planning office. I cut in, my professional confidence unwavering. Official copies. Want to see them? For the first time, Gabrielle's banker's composure shattered completely. You accessed official records? And I found everything. The fake complaints, the forged permits, the development plans. It's all there, Gabrielle. Every single document. The unraveling. The contractor stood up, clutching his portfolio. Miss Shelton, if there's some kind of legal issue. There's no issue, she said through gritted teeth, her banking facade crumbling. Everything's perfectly in order. My phone buzzed. An email from Amanda with the promised documents. I held up my phone triumphantly. Years of analyzing property deals evident in my confident stance. Want to see the proof? It's right here. Every single forged document. Every manipulated permit. Gabrielle's face hardened into her board meeting expression. You have no idea what you're doing, Alexandra. No idea who you're dealing with in this market. No, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I turned to my parents, my voice steady with professional certainty. Check your emails. I'm sending you everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every secret meeting with Valum Development. I've analyzed hundreds of property deals. This one's as fraudulent as they come. Gabrielle? My mother's voice was small. Is this true? But Gabrielle was already heading for the door, the contractor trailing behind her like a forgotten accessory. At the threshold, she turned back, her investment banker's mask firmly back in place. This isn't over, Alexandra. Not by a long shot. After she left, silence filled the kitchen. My father stared at the documents, his face ashen. We should have asked you, he finally said. Should have verified. Yes, you should have. I gathered the papers with practiced efficiency. But now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I left them there, surrounded by evidence of their misplaced trust. In my car, I called Dakota. Phase 1 complete, I said, slipping into our old nursing shorthand. Now we go after Marcus and the Valum Group. The strategy. Finding Marcus proved easier than I expected. He was at his usual lunch spot, an upscale cafe downtown, with his sister, Iris. I smoothed my professional blazer and approached their table. Dakota close behind me with her legal assistant's quiet confidence. Mind if we join you? I asked, not waiting for an answer before sliding into the empty chair. My property analyst's ID badge was strategically visible. Marcus's fork clattered against his bone china plate. Alexandra? What are you doing here? Fascinating story, actually. I was just at the city planning office, reviewing some very interesting development proposals about my property. My voice carried the calm authority I'd developed from years of analyzing controversial deals. Iris's eyes narrowed with legal department precision. Your property? The Victorian house Gabrielle mentioned? The same one your brother's company plans to demolish, I said, watching Marcus's face with the same attention I gave to suspicious property documents. Interesting how that wasn't mentioned in the family discussions. Demolish? Iris turned to her brother, her legal training evident in her sharp tone. Marcus? What is she talking about? Marcus dabbed his mouth with a monogrammed napkin. Every inch the polished CEO. This isn't the appropriate venue. It's exactly the venue, I interrupted, pulling out the development proposals. Your company filed these 2 months ago, before the eviction notice, before all of Gabrielle's carefully constructed lies. I've analyzed enough development deals to recognize a predetermined outcome. Iris snatched the papers, her legal expertise showing in her quick documents review. You're planning to demolish the entire historic street? Replace it with luxury condos? It's a sound business decision, Marcus defended, his CEO persona firmly in place. The neighborhood's market value is significantly underutilized. It's my home. I cut in, and Gabrielle has been manipulating my family to get it. I've spent enough time analyzing property deals to recognize a hostile takeover. The revelation. Marcus shifted in his seat, his CEO confidence wavering. Your parents were willing sellers, but I caught the uncertainty in his voice. Dakota leaned forward, her legal training evident. They were willing because Gabrielle showed them forged documents claiming Alexandra was mismanaging the property. She orchestrated this entire scheme. Iris pushed her plate away, professional disgust evident in her features. Is this why you're rushing the wedding? To fast-track this development deal? The timing is advantageous, he admitted, his corporate mask slipping. Advantageous. I laughed, the sound sharp with professional indignation. You're destroying historically preserved homes, erasing architectural heritage. My property analyst's passion broke through. Progress requires strategic sacrifice, Marcus started, but Iris cut him off. No. This requires fraud and deception, and as head of legal, I won't be party to it. She stood up, gathering her briefcase with decisive movements. Count me out of the wedding party and any associated legal proceedings. Iris, wait. Marcus called after his sister, but she was already striding away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. I smiled, channeling Gabrielle's banking confidence. Trouble in the corporate family? You have no right to interfere in Valum Group's business dealings, he hissed, CEO persona cracking. And you have no right to my property. I stood up, my analyst's training evident in my steady voice. By the way, I've sent copies of everything to the City Ethics Board. They're particularly interested in how Valum obtained those preliminary approvals. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. Try me. I dropped my business card on the table. That's my attorney's number. Use it. Outside, Iris was waiting by my car, her legal portfolio clutched tightly. I want to help. Why should I trust you? Because I've watched Gabrielle manipulate my brother for months. Because I've seen how she operates in corporate settings. Iris's eyes flashed with professional determination. And because I have access to Valum's internal files. The alliance. Dakota grabbed my arm, her legal assistant instincts kicking in. Alex, this could be huge. What's in it for you? I asked Iris, my analyst's skepticism showing. Justice and professional integrity, she replied, pulling out her phone with practiced efficiency. Starting with these emails between Gabrielle and my brother, dating back 6 months. I scanned the messages, my heart racing as my trained eye caught every damning detail. There it was, explicit discussion of their scheme to pressure my parents, to force the sale, to fast-track the development through regulatory loopholes I dealt with daily. This is exactly what we need, Dakota breathed, her legal experience recognizing the significance. There's more, Iris said, her voice carrying the weight of corporate legal authority. Board meeting minutes, private conversations, financial arrangements. I can get you everything. The kind of documentation that would interest both the Ethics Board and the Historical Preservation Society. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Mom and Dad want to talk. They've seen the evidence. The tide's turning. I turned to Iris. We need to move fast. The wedding's in 10 days. Perfect timing for everything to unravel. She smiled grimly. I'll send you what I have tonight. The full corporate paper trail. As Iris walked away, Dakota turned to me. Are you sure about this? Using her? She's using us too, I pointed out, my analytical mind weighing the risks. But right now, we want the same thing, exposing the truth. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The message made my blood run cold. Back off now, or you'll regret it. Some things are worth more than a historic property. Dakota read over my shoulder, her protective instincts flaring. She's threatening you. She's desperate, I corrected, saving the message as evidence with practiced efficiency. And desperate people make mistakes in documentation. I headed toward my car, determination fueling every step. Let's go see my parents. It's time to show them exactly who they've been protecting. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated, but Gabrielle's threat lingered in my mind. My years analyzing property disputes had taught me that the most dangerous moment was when victory seemed closest. Something told me the worst was yet to come. The warning. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Jumping out of bed, I rushed downstairs to find my meticulously restored Victorian window in pieces, a brick lying among the shards of historic glass. A note was wrapped around it. Final warning. My hands shook as I called the police, my property analyst's training kicking in to document everything. While waiting, I texted Dakota and Ethan. They arrived before the officers did, Dakota already in her legal assistant mode, taking photos of the damage. This has gone too far, Ethan said, examining the brick with his architect's eye. You need to be careful, Alex. This is more than just a property dispute now. I'm not backing down. I handed the note to the police officer who was taking my statement. This is connected to a larger situation involving fraudulent property development plans. I have extensive documentation. Just file a restraining order, the officer suggested, looking uninterested. Not much we can do without proof of who threw it. After they left, Dakota helped me board up the window, her movements precise and practiced. At least we have Iris's evidence now. Those internal emails she sent last night are devastating to both Gabrielle and Valum Group. Speaking of which, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother. I need to go see them. They've had time to process all the documentation. I'm coming with you, Ethan insisted, his protective instincts visible in his stance. This isn't just about property anymore. 20 minutes later, we sat in our parents' living room. Mom's eyes were red from crying. We've been such fools, she whispered. All those documents Gabrielle showed us. We wanted to believe she was helping. The development plans, Dad added, his voice heavy with realization. We had no idea they planned to demolish the whole historic district. We thought they were just doing renovations to preserve the architecture. Gabrielle knew exactly what buttons to push, I said, my analytical mind reconstructing her strategy. She played on your concerns about me, made you think I was in financial trouble. Used my career change from nursing to property analysis against me. The emergency. She's been manipulating this family for years, Ethan added, his architect's precision evident in his analysis. Remember when she convinced you to give her great-aunt Martha's antique crystal instead of Alex? Said it would be safer with her? Mom's face crumpled. She said you thought it was too old-fashioned, that you were more interested in modern designs. I never said that, I replied, my voice steady with professional certainty. Just like I never made unauthorized changes to the house, never had complaints from the Historical Preservation Society. We know that now, Dad said, his businessman's pride wounded. We've talked to everyone on the street. No one ever complained. In fact, they all praise what you've done with the property. My phone buzzed. Iris, emergency. Meet me at Riverside Park now. Corporate crisis. I have to go. I stood up, my analyst's instincts on high alert. But first, are you with me on this? Really with me? Mom squared her shoulders, determination replacing guilt. We'll do whatever it takes to make this right. At the park, Iris paced near the fountain, her corporate legal composure completely shattered. Gabrielle knows I helped you. She's threatening to reveal something about my past to the Vallum board. What something? A mistake I made years ago in corporate law. It could destroy my career. She ran her hands through her perfectly styled hair. I can't. I can't risk it. Hey, I grabbed her shoulders, my nurse's training taking over. Whatever it is, it can't be worse than what she's doing now. Attempting to fraudulently seize and demolish historically protected properties. You don't understand. My entire professional life could collapse. Then let it. My voice carried the authority of someone who'd already reinvented herself. Sometimes you have to lose everything to do what's right. I left nursing to become a property analyst because I saw how development deals were destroying our architectural heritage. Iris's eyes filled with tears, smudging her perfect makeup. Easy for you to say. You're just fighting for a house. No. I'm fighting for justice, for truth, for every property owner Gabrielle has ever manipulated or hurt. I softened my tone, channeling my old nursing demeanor. Including you. The revelation continues. Iris wiped her eyes, her legal training reasserting itself. There's something else. I overheard Marcus on a corporate call. They're accelerating the timeline. They want to close the property deal immediately after the wedding. That's in a week. The rehearsal dinner is in 3 days. She straightened up, professional resolve returning. You're right. I can't let them win. Not again. This goes against everything I stand for as head of legal. My phone lit up with another text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed the brick. Next time, it won't be your historic windows. I showed Iris the message. Her face hardened with corporate legal indignation. Gabrielle's really spiraling. This is way beyond professional misconduct now. Good, I said, my analyst's mind already calculating. The more desperate she gets, the more mistakes she'll make in the documentation. The rehearsal dinner, Iris said suddenly, her legal strategist's mind working. All the major players will be there. Investors, board members, family, the entire real estate development community. Perfect timing to expose everything. She paused. But Gabrielle will be expecting something. She'll be prepared. I smiled grimly, thinking of all the property deals I'd analyzed. Then we'll have to be better prepared. I need every document, every email, every piece of evidence you can get. And I need them tonight. Iris nodded, her professional efficiency returning. I'll have them to you in 2 hours. Full corporate documentation. As she walked away, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Dakota. Your mom just called. Gabrielle's at their house. She's crying, saying you're trying to ruin her career. Your parents aren't buying it, but she's putting on quite a show. I texted back, my years of professional experience evident. Let her perform. In 3 days, she'll have a real corporate crisis to cry about. The stakes were higher now. The threats more serious. But with each desperate move Gabrielle made, she only proved how close we were to exposing the entire fraudulent scheme. The countdown to the rehearsal dinner had begun, and this time I had both corporate evidence and historical preservation law on my side. Legal preparations. The day before the rehearsal dinner, I sat in my attorney's office, surrounded by stacks of meticulously organized evidence. Sarah, my lawyer, flipped through the documents with experienced precision. "These emails between Gabrielle and Marcus are damning," she said, highlighting key passages. "And the forged historical preservation documents. That's criminal misconduct on multiple levels." "But is it enough?" I asked, my property analyst's mind demanding certainty. "To stop the development? Absolutely. To press charges? Definitely." She leaned forward, legal strategy evident in her tone. "But are you sure you want to do this at the rehearsal dinner? Though I must admit, the timing is perfect. All the investors will be there, plus the entire real estate development community." My phone buzzed. Another threat from Gabrielle. Last chance to back off. "Remember, I know about the Riverside project." Sarah caught my expression. "What's wrong?" "She's trying to blackmail me now." I showed her the text. "But the Riverside project? It's nothing. Just a development deal I criticized in my analysis report. She thinks she can use it against me." "Document everything," Sarah advised, handing me a USB drive. "I've organized all the evidence here, including the police report about the brick and the threatening messages." "Are you sure you don't want private security? Property disputes can turn ugly fast." "I'll be fine. Dakota and Ethan will be with me tomorrow night." Outside the office, I found Iris waiting in her corporate car. "Get in," she said urgently. "There's something you need to see." She drove us to Valum Group's headquarters, parking in the underground garage. "Marcus and Gabrielle are in a board meeting upstairs. But look at this." She pulled out her tablet, showing me security footage from earlier that day. Gabrielle was arguing with someone in the garage, her father. "Turn up the volume," I said, my analyst's instincts picking up on something. "The discovery. I can't keep covering for you," her father was saying, his notary's professional ethics clearly struggling. "The falsified permits. The forged preservation documents. It's too much liability." "Daddy, please." Gabrielle's banking confidence had vanished. "Just one more day. After the rehearsal dinner, it won't matter anymore." "What's happening after the rehearsal dinner?" I asked Iris, my analyst's mind already connecting dots. "I don't know," she said, her legal training evident in her frown. "But they've booked a private room at the restaurant. Invitation only after the main event. Key investors and board members only." My phone rang. "Dakota." "Alex, you need to get home now. Someone's been in your house." I broke every speed limit getting back. Dakota and Ethan were waiting outside, both looking grim. Inside, my breath caught. Every historic feature I'd restored, every period-appropriate renovation I'd documented, every architectural element I'd preserved had been photographed and marked with bright red X's. "They're documenting everything they plan to demolish," Ethan said quietly, his architect's eye taking in the scope of the planned destruction. "They're not even trying to preserve any of the historic elements." Dakota picked up a business card left on my restored Victorian counter. "Look who's handling the demolition." The company name made my blood boil. It belonged to Gabrielle's uncle. "They're keeping it all in the family," I said bitterly. "A complete corporate takeover. How did they even get in?" "Your mom called," Ethan said. "Gabrielle asked to borrow her spare key this morning. Said she needed to measure for wedding decorations. When Mom refused, Gabrielle broke down crying, saying you were trying to ruin her special day. Mom felt guilty and admitted where she keeps the spare." I sank onto the original hardwood stairs, looking at the red X's everywhere. This was my grandmother's house. I learned to walk on these floors, had my first kiss in that bay window. Now they're planning to destroy every bit of its history. "And you're not going to lose it," Dakota said firmly. her legal assistant's determination showing. Tomorrow night, we end this entire fraudulent scheme. The final preparations. My phone buzzed with a text from Iris. Emergency. Gabrielle's changed the seating arrangements. You're not on the list for the private meeting anymore. Doesn't matter. I texted back, my analyst's mind already adapting. We'll do it during the main dinner. More witnesses that way. I spent the rest of the day with Sarah, finalizing our strategy. By nightfall, everything was ready. As I lay in bed that night, I heard footsteps on my restored Victorian porch. Grabbing my phone to call the police, I crept to the window, but it was just my mother leaving something by the door. I opened it to find a small package with a note. Your grandmother wanted you to have this. I should have given it to you years ago. Love, Mom. Inside was my grandmother's antique locket, the one Gabrielle had claimed I didn't want. Opening it, I found a tiny photograph of my grandmother standing proudly in front of the house the day she bought it. The same house I'd left nursing to become a property analyst to protect. My phone lit up with one final threat from Gabrielle. Hope you're ready for tomorrow's corporate showdown, because I am. I touched the locket, then looked at the red X's marking my walls, each one representing a piece of history they planned to destroy. Bring it on, I whispered. Tomorrow everything would change. Either I'd save my home and expose their fraudulent development scheme, or I'd lose everything I'd fought to preserve. But looking at my grandmother's proud smile in that old photograph, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going down without using every bit of my professional expertise. The rehearsal dinner couldn't come soon enough. Gabrielle had no idea she wasn't just facing a former nurse. She was up against someone who'd spent years analyzing exactly the kind of fraudulent property deals she was trying to pull off. The rehearsal dinner buzzed with the familiar energy of high-stakes property deals. Gabrielle held court at the main table, resplendent in white, while Marcus worked the room, charming potential investors. I sat between Dakota and Ethan, my grandmother's locket cool against my skin, my property analyst's badge a reminder of why I was here. Look who just arrived, Dakota whispered, her legal assistant's attention to detail catching the new arrivals. Sarah came with Iris, right on schedule. Gabrielle's investment banker smile flickered for just a moment before she recovered, rising to greet them. Iris, darling, I was worried you wouldn't make it after our little corporate disagreement. Wouldn't miss it, Iris said coldly, then turned to the assembled guests with practiced legal precision. Have you met Sarah? She's a fascinating person, specializes in real estate fraud and historical preservation law. The room quieted slightly. Marcus appeared at Gabrielle's side, his CO hand tight on her arm. Perhaps we should start the toasts, he suggested, corporate damage control evident in his tone. Wonderful idea. I stood up, raising my glass with the confidence of someone who'd analyzed hundreds of property deals. I'd like to go first. Gabrielle's face drained of color. That's not on the program. Oh, but I insist. I moved to the center of the room, my professional demeanor firmly in place. After all, what kind of property analyst would I be if I didn't congratulate you on your achievements? The room fell silent, all eyes on me, including those of several prominent real estate developers I recognized from my analysis reports. Alexandra, my mother warned softly, but her heart wasn't in it. It's okay, Mom. I'm just going to share some interesting documentation with everyone. I nodded to Sarah, who began distributing folders to the investors. Consider it my wedding gift to the corporate world. Security, Gabrielle called out, but Iris was already blocking the door. Let's start with the emails, I continued, my voice carrying across the stunned room. Detailed plans to forge historical preservation documents, manipulate my family, and steal my property for Valum's development project. The exposure. Marcus stepped forward, his CEO persona cracking. These are private corporate matters. Fraud is never private. Sarah interjected with legal authority. Neither is forgery of historical preservation documents, which brings us to Exhibit B, the falsified complaints and unauthorized permits, complete with illegal notary stamps from Gabrielle's father. Gabrielle's father stood up, his face red with professional shame. Now wait just a minute. The ethics board is very interested in your involvement, Sarah added smoothly, every inch the experienced fraud attorney. They'll be particularly interested in how these documents relate to historically protected properties. You're ruining everything, Gabrielle shrieked, lunging for the folders, but Ethan was faster, already passing copies to the board members with an architect's precision. Like you tried to ruin my property? I asked, my analyst's voice steady. The threats, the brick through my historic window, the unauthorized break-in? Gasps rippled through the crowd of real estate professionals. Iris stood up, her legal authority filling the room. The police have been notified. About everything. Marcus, do something, Gabrielle pleaded, but Marcus was busy reading the documents, his face growing darker with each page of damning evidence. You told me her family agreed to sell, he said, CO mask slipping completely. That everything was legally cleared through historical preservation. It was just business, Gabrielle protested, her banking composure shattered. A simple property acquisition. Simple? I pulled out my phone, playing the security footage Iris had given me. Gabrielle's voice filled the room. After the rehearsal dinner, it won't matter anymore. What were you planning? Marcus demanded, his corporate authority now focused entirely on his fiancée. What happens after dinner? Gabrielle's silence was damning. Her father broke it, professional ethics finally winning out. The demolition crew is scheduled for midnight, he admitted. We thought if the house was already down. You were going to destroy my historically protected home tonight? My voice cracked with genuine emotion. While everyone was celebrating your wedding. The aftermath. The room erupted in chaos. Real estate investors stormed out. Board members huddled in corners making urgent calls. Family members argued loudly. Through it all, Gabrielle stood frozen, her perfectly constructed corporate world crumbling around her. The development deal is void, Marcus announced, his CO voice hard with fury. And so is the wedding. But the deposits, the contracts. Gabrielle's voice was small, her banking confidence evaporated. Are void due to fraud, Sarah supplied helpfully, as is the eviction notice. The Historical Preservation Society will be particularly interested in the attempted destruction of protected property. My mother approached Gabrielle slowly, decades of family history in her eyes. How could you do this to family? Because she never cared about family, I said quietly, my analyst's training allowing me to see the bigger picture. Only power, control, getting what she wants, no matter who she hurts. I've seen dozens of development deals like this, but never one that tried to destroy a historically protected family home. Gabrielle's composure finally broke completely. You think you've won? You've ruined everything I worked for. No, I touched my grandmother's locket, my voice steady. You did that yourself. Every lie, every scheme, every betrayal of both family and professional ethics. That was all you. The police arrived then, asking questions, taking statements. I watched as Gabrielle's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, her corporate mask falling away to reveal the desperate person beneath. The house is yours, my father said, hugging me tight. It always was. We forgot what family heritage really means. Later, standing outside the restaurant, Dakota squeezed my hand. How does it feel? I looked at the night sky, thinking of my grandmother's photograph and all the historic properties I'd helped protect as an analyst. Like justice. Like preservation of what matters. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Iris. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Valum Group, pulling out of all historic neighborhood developments. You did it. Epilogue. The morning sun streamed through my newly restored Victorian window as I sipped coffee on my historic front porch. The newspaper headline caught my eye. Valum Development faces investigation. CEO steps down. Below it, a smaller headline. Local historical property saved from fraudulent development scheme. My property analyst's heart swelled with professional pride. My phone rang. Iris, have you seen the news? Just reading it now. How are you holding up? Better than expected. The Historical Preservation Society appointed me to their advisory board. Turns out exposing fraudulent development schemes has its perks. A car pulled into my driveway. My parents. Mom carried a large box, while Dad lugged what looked like old property documents. I'll call you back, I told Iris. Mom set the box down carefully. We've been going through the attic, found some things that belong here. Inside were pieces of my grandmother's life, her original property deeds, renovation journals, architectural plans. Dad opened one of the albums, pointing to a yellowed photograph. That's her, the day she bought this house. Said it was her proudest moment, until you decided to protect it and other historic properties like it. The screen door creaked open as Dakota emerged with more coffee. Look who just pulled up, she said, her legal assistant's eye-catching movement across the street. Officer Martinez approached, holding a document. Miss Mitchell, we've recovered some items from Ms. Shelton's office. Things she took from your house. Historical documents. He handed me a folder. Also thought you should know she's agreed to a plea deal. Full confession to the attempted fraud and property destruction. Thank you, I said, taking the folder. Inside were old photographs and property records she'd stolen years ago, claiming they'd been lost. The DA wants to know if you'll testify about the harassment and attempted destruction of a historic property, Officer Martinez added. I looked at my repaired window, remembering the brick, the threats, the fear. Yes, I will. The new beginning. He nodded and left. Mom touched one of the recovered photographs. Your 5th birthday, she said. Gabrielle was so jealous of your party, she actually tore up the original property deed. We should have seen the signs back then. We all missed the signs, I said, my analyst's mind now calmer. But we can't change the past. We can only preserve what matters for the future. Ethan's truck rumbled up the street, Marcus surprisingly in the passenger seat. They carried renovation supplies. Before you say anything, Ethan called out, his architect's pride evident. He volunteered to help restore what they almost destroyed. Marcus set down a box of historically accurate restoration materials. I owe you. We all do. Let me help preserve what we almost demolished. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. Start with the back porch railing. It needs restoration to meet historical preservation codes. The day unfolded like a healing breath. While Ethan and Marcus worked on historically accurate repairs, Mom and I sorted through grandmother's original property documents. Dakota organized a neighborhood preservation meeting on the lawn. Even Iris stopped by, bringing corporate documents showing Valum's new commitment to historical preservation. The board wants to establish a fund, she explained, her legal expertise showing in her precise explanation, to help homeowners restore historic properties instead of demolishing them. Karma works in mysterious ways, Dakota mused, arranging Preservation Society pamphlets. As evening approached, neighbors gathered on my lawn, sharing food and stories. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought her famous empanadas. Your grandmother loved these, she told me. She hosted Preservation Society meetings here all the time. The house was always full of people fighting to protect our neighborhood's history. I touched my locket. thinking of the photograph inside. Maybe it's time to restart that tradition. Final scene. Dad raised his glass to preservation and new beginnings. And to protecting what matters, Mom added, looking at the restored details of our family home. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Plea deal finalized. Gabrielle's serving time. The house is officially protected under Historical Preservation Act. Looking around at my gathered family, friends, and neighbors, I realized something. This house wasn't just walls and windows, not just another property to be analyzed. It was a living piece of history, alive with memories and possibilities. You know, Dakota said, arranging Preservation Society membership forms on my restored Victorian table. Your birthday is coming up again. No surprise parties this time, I laughed. No, she agreed, but maybe a historical home tour to celebrate properly. I watched Ethan and Marcus arguing good-naturedly about period-appropriate porch designs. Mom sharing grandmother's renovation journals with interested neighbors. Dad telling stories about the house history to enthralled Preservation Society members. I'd like that, I said, my property analyst's heart at peace. A fresh start. The evening wind carried the scent of blooming heritage roses, grandmother's favorite. She'd planted them along the fence years ago, and like the house itself, they had endured. To fresh starts, I raised my glass. And to preserving our history. The gathered crowd echoed the toast, their voices mixing with the sounds of our historic neighborhood. This was what Gabrielle never understood, what no development plan could capture. The heart of a historic home beating strong through generations. I sat on my restored porch steps, surrounded by love and community, knowing that while the battle for my house was over, my journey as a protector of historic properties was just beginning. And this time, every page would be filled with preservation, not destruction, with welcome, not threats, with family, both the kind you're born to and the kind you choose. This was my legacy, my victory, my peace, and it was beautifully, historically preserved.